And please join me to welcoming Mr. Thue Thomasen, CEO of Decision Lab, to the stage. A big round of applause to welcome.
Great to see a full room here, and hopefully people are following as well on Facebook and the other floors of this conference here. I have the honor today to set the stage a little bit of where we are in the Vietnamese economy. And from the networking event, MMA event yesterday, when talking to people, I get a lot of feedback that for a lot of businesses, both agencies and for brands, it's still a little bit difficult to predict where we are. What is happening with the economy. We turn on VTV and we see great growth numbers, but why is it not necessarily impacting our business directly? And at Decision Lab, we work with this every day. We dive into the data, we try and understand the consumer sentiment, and I hope to share with you a little bit about where we are today, where the sentiment is heading, and most importantly, how you adapt your business to the road ahead. So just briefly about myself, I have 20 years of experience in marketing, in research and consulting, and quite a few of them from Vietnam. So I've been following Vietnam through a very, very exciting time where the market have developed. We went from TV to digital, and it's, I think every year in Vietnam is the most exciting time to be in Vietnam. So it continues to be a market that changes and a market that keeps itself super relevant. Now at Decision Lab, we believe that in these volatile times that we live in, it's really, really important to stay synchronized with your consumers. It is becoming more and more unpredictable what's going to happen. And you might think, well, why then research at all? Why study consumers if you can't predict anything? But actually it becomes more and more important to basically stay synchronized to these changing habits so that you can adapt faster and faster. So what we try at Decision Lab and what is our promise is to drive new thinking in the market, new technology to make sure your brand is more data-driven, stays agile and connected to the changing consumer habits. And at Decision Lab, we're proud to bring some of the highest level of expertise in online research to the market. I think research has, like marketing, has digitalized over the last few years. And now it's recognized that the fastest way to get insights from consumers all over Vietnam is online, but it can be very, very difficult to navigate. It can be quite difficult to get the right quality. And therefore, we are proud to bring the leading expertise to this area. And we do that together with two important partners. We are the Vietnam partner of the global company YouGov that brings some of the highest quality panels in the world. And just recently, we became the exclusive reseller for Milieu as well, and have joined forces here in Vietnam. So basically, having access to the two best sources of consumer data online in Vietnam. So we really hope to work with a lot of you when you have the need to understand consumers in Vietnam. Now, one of the things that's important for us is really to contribute, and that's also why we're here today, why we like to share our knowledge. So I think a lot of you know Decision Lab from a lot of the available reports we have on our website, Connected Consumer. We just launched the State of AI in Vietnam. And this also makes Decision Lab the most quoted research company in Vietnam, and we're very, very proud of that position. Now let's look at today's topic and look at why confidence is important. So Vietnam stands at a crossroad right now. We have global turbulence, and every year I think we believe that it will be over, it will be getting better. But the thing about unpredictable things is, of course, that it suddenly will appear. And I believe that in the next several years to come, we also need to embrace ourselves for global turbulence. At the same time, we have domestic acceleration, and it's very interesting to look at those two things together. Consumers are changing, and I think a lot of what we are warning players in Vietnam, brands in Vietnam about is we've had some tough years. But remember, now is where the new startups arrive, the new capital arrives, the new international players arrive. So you still need to keep renewing yourself in order to be relevant. And brands must navigate this with both caution and opportunity. to make sure you make the right choices. So global shocks seem to be a permanent situation for us, and I like this picture here from Forbes that shows both how we in some way are becoming quite connected to the dramatic global tension between US and China, but also how things can become quite random, and maybe Vietnam can be misunderstood, and suddenly we find ourselves in a dangerous position. And I think that's what many of us woke up to when we saw this fantastic chart here. Of course, as a research company, we started diving into, where did these numbers come from? How did he come up with this 90% tariff charge to US? And of course, there was no basis for it, but it was the highest possible number in order to bring himself into a negotiation position. What was really, really dangerous about this was that Vietnam has been gaining a lot of benefit from not being China. And basically because we have a more stable position in geopolitics, and therefore we have had very high level of foreign direct investment for years. And with the 46% being put up here, we would be much, much less competitive than many of our neighboring countries, and maybe the whole movement from China would suddenly be a thing of the past. So we asked the Vietnamese consumers what they thought about this, and immediately a lot of people got stressed out. A lot of people got sad. Also, a few got optimistic, interestingly enough, in this situation here. And we asked them about the forecast, about the agreement, and most of them said an agreement will happen and it will contribute both sides. And I think that's quite interesting because I'm a European myself, and in Europe the reaction is a little bit like a family relative suddenly kicking you out of the house. For us, it's emotional. With US, we had a deal. I think for Vietnam, we're a little bit more pragmatic. We see this as a global economy. US has a lot of muscles, and of course they're gonna flex them and try and get the best possible deal. But we have also dealt with big powers in Vietnam before, and we never come out of it in a completely horrible way. So we know the game. So what we overall see was Vietnamese kept their cool, and they stayed largely unaffected. And I think that's quite interesting because I always ask people about how they spend to find out how stressed they actually are. So people in this situation actually said they would increase their daily expenses. They would increase eating out at restaurants. You can say largely unaffected by this news. A bit of concern around job stability, but in general, I don't read any fear out of data like this. One thing that was interesting though is, I was following on Facebook all my friends back in Europe that were boycotting American goods, getting angry at US. Interestingly enough, they were doing it on Facebook, which is of course also American. But we don't see that kind of reaction here. I don't think anyone really got proper angry at the Americans for this, but we see the news, the turmoil in America is doing something to the understanding of the American dream in Vietnam. So for many, many years, a lot of people in Vietnam had a dream to immigrate to US. A lot of people have studied in the US. And it's quite interesting to see the number not attractive at all. Like quite a big proportion of Vietnamese that completely refuse going to the US, whether it's immigration, tourism, or education. And we work quite a lot with education clients, and you can see this really, really having an impact on how Vietnamese are applying for overseas studies. So it's a quite interesting development, and I think this is some of the long-term harm that we will see on the US brand in Vietnam. Now then, we heard recently GDP is up again. This quarter has been fantastic. We are looking at highest GDP growth in decades. The government are changing their projections. Everything is great. And my fantastic team who was preparing this presentation, they put first the classic skyline of Saigon to symbolize growth. And I said, well, let's change that. And I don't know if any of you recognize where this skyline is. You will need to start looking that way. This is the emerging skyline of Haiphong. And I think one of the reasons why we're not experiencing so much in this room is that a lot of this growth is not happening right here. A lot of this is resulting in things moving from China. And when I talk to friends and colleagues who are working in Haiphong, in Hanoi, in industrial areas, there's a lot of growth going on. So I do believe that we are seeing a very high level of growth, but it's distributed in a completely new way. And overall, we see exports, FDI, foreign sentiment remaining strong. We track the European Business Confidence Index as well at Decision Lab. And we can see generally a relatively high confidence, not too much affected, especially looking at long term. So what is happening to consumer confidence in this country here? Is it positive? Is it negative? Why are we not seeing the effect of the GDP growth so much in the spending of Vietnamese? Overall, when we ask consumers in Vietnam, they say that they have both more money than last year, and they also believe that in the next 12 months, they will again be better off financially. So money is actually channeling into people's pockets. People are getting richer, but something is going on the spending. And one of the things, interestingly, to track is the consumer confidence in Vietnam. So if you look at this throughout the last 6 months or 7 months, you can see consumer confidence, first of all, relatively stable. There's not a lot of peaks, not a lot of things really changing the mindset during a period that is relatively tumultuous. And I think that, first of all, gives an indication that we're keeping it cool in this country. We are getting used to disruption. But you're also seeing a slight decline here. So basically, Vietnamese getting a little bit less and less confident on the current situation in Vietnam. Oh. And that has some effect on the consumers. One of them being that financial discipline is now back in fashion. And we see this change especially with Gen Z, who have been growing up in positive times. Nothing bad could happen. Every year is better than last year. Why are my parents always talking about saving up for a rainy day? That's just because they are old. But now with these few crises happen, we can actually see a change in the behavior, and financial discipline is back, saving up, etc. So if we look at the intention to save, you can see this is relatively high. It was high also when we tracked it earlier. It remains high. The need to borrow is not that strong anymore. So interestingly enough, a lot of the short-term lending doesn't necessarily peak at a time where the economy is bad, because people are also looking at, will I be able to pay back over time? So generally, people are saving up more. People want to save up for the future. They want to invest. They want to secure their future. And you can see that in general on spending. It's getting better. So when we showed this chart 6 months ago, things were worse. People were cutting down more. Now, generally, we're losing up a little bit. We're starting to spend more and more across categories, but still holding back on big ticket items, electronic devices, fashion, etc., postponing this to later. On the other hand, we can see in some categories, education, investments, etc., you can see people pouring more money into that. So there is a shift. And I think what we need to remember is all this time when we've been in crisis mode after COVID, financial difficulty, etc., we've tend to look maybe too much inwards on our business instead of looking at what are also the new trends, what are the new ways we need to promote ourselves. Another thing that's happening is that the long term is changing in Vietnam. And these two distinctive gentlemen here, they have a plan, and they also have the resolve and the determination to push through on plans. And I think that's quite interesting, because that means that in our planning in our companies, we need to get a little bit more political, which is something in the south of Vietnam we have often not been that good at incorporating into our plans. So it is important to start looking at what are the initiatives in the government, because this is going to drive growth. It's going to drive the direction for quite a few companies in Vietnam. So Doi Moi 2.0 is here. We're entering a new era of reform. I think most of us have felt it when we woke up one morning and didn't know where we lived. But I think now we have all found our new ward, and we are back to work. But in general, we see restructuring of government. It's not having too much impact now, but it will have more impact. We will have units that will be stronger, more professionalized. We will see investments in infrastructure, expanding expenditure there, which will help boost the economy, and we will see growing innovation. And this is both because what you hear in the news, that the government wants to drive long-term growth. It's also because government is scared, because Vietnam's growth have been fueled by cheap, available labor. Everything is getting more expensive in Vietnam, and we're all getting older. So there is a change here, and we need to drive future growth on something else than just a lot of young people wanting to produce things in manufacturing zones. So watch out for some of the areas where government will focus. They are becoming much more open to drive this with private sector, not just keeping it to state-owned enterprises. So this is really, really important to keep track on. And we can see in general, if we look at the long term, this is back from the European confidence, we see the long-term outlook is quite positive for Vietnam. Foreign investors believe in this country. Vietnamese believe in this country. And overall, we're starting to see foreign direct investment numbers picking up. So I do believe we are going through a year here of changes that might not have so much short-term effect, but in the long term, this is going to be really important. So what are the implications for brands and marketers here? It's very, very important for brands to build long-term trust and relevance. Consumers want reliability in uncertain times. And therefore, the important thing is to provide value. And value does not just mean offering something cheap. This is not the time of coupons. It's really important to understand what is the value consumers are going for. You see restaurants that deliver on their promise, they do well. Those who are maybe new, exciting, they don't have as easy a time as earlier. I will go a little bit fast through these slides here to keep up. So just a few of the things we see in the market here. Things consolidating around key players. I will skip over this one. Yes. So basically, the key point, I think, for you to remember when you do your planning, when you look at the next 6-12 months ahead, is consumers, like our friend on the left here, is consumers are cautious today, but they're confident about tomorrow. And that you need to make sure that that's built into both your business plan and your marketing. So short term, cautious, deliberate, value-driven. Long term, we're going to see very high growth in this country. We're going to see ambitious plans, and we're going to pull ahead. The reforms will accelerate this growth. And therefore, our belief is that this is really the time, if you are not in Vietnam, to enter Vietnam, but also this is a time for all of you operating in Vietnam to really gear up, to look at your plans, to plan for the future. Because with more growth in Vietnam, you are also going to see a period with increased competition. More companies, more brands will want to have a part of the Vietnamese market. So at Decision Lab, we are hopeful about the future, a little bit cautious about today. Thank you very much.